Hello and welcome to this quick brief outline and a lecture on your water treatment course. So today I'm going to give you a 20-minute version of the entire cybersecurity topic. Of course, we could have an entire course or degree program on this area, so it's important to understand that this is just a brief, the most 10,000 feet, 20,000 feet in the air overview of the entire area. But on this presentation, I'm going to just go through some of the most common types of attacks or why people need and organizations need to prepare for different types of cybersecurity threats. I'm also going to go through the most common types of preventing the attacks, or how to do countermeasurements in your organization or industrial automation plant or your water treatment plant to prepare for cyber attacks or enhance your cybersecurity to the level where it's actually usable and something that you can trust on if there's any critical or different situation where your organization is under attack. And if you don't know me, probably don't, my name is Jussi Kasurinen. I'm the head of the degree programs in software engineering, and I've been working with the software testing and software quality assurance and also on cybersecurity topics for more than 10 years now. So I have to admit that I'm not exactly a cybersecurity professional, but I am a software professional and software quality assurance and quality control professional. So I'm going to give you a speech from the viewpoint of how these things are considered from the viewpoint of developing the system. The maintenance aspects and the other cycles of the hardware type of approach is something that you probably want to talk with your own system providers or people who are actually building the automation tools for you. Anyway, let's start. So what is wrong with this picture? Well, the first of all is that it's actually giving you the wrong idea of what cybersecurity is. It's a classic image to give you an idea of vaguely disturbing or vaguely scary person using gloves on their laptop without sunglasses on or mask on in their home doing work, and it's it also means that it's usually something personified to one person or criminal activity. Of course, we know that most of the cybersecurity threats are somehow involved in criminal activities. But on the other hand, when we are talking about the cybersecurity, we also need to consider things like accidental loss of information or accidentally locking ourselves out or causing a problem within the system just by doing accidentally something that we shouldn't have been able to do. For example, Chernobyl nuclear power plant accident didn't involve any cybersecurity threats. It was just done by people who didn't bother to understand how the system worked or were overriding the security protocols because they wanted to try out something else, and it's sort of a security threat which we also should take into account when we are designing system which also works against these types of hooded non-faced persons. In general, the idea also is that the security is something that you just put on your system. You just install the software, install the hardware, turn the blip on, and now we are secured. Of course, this is not true. The security aspects require constant maintenance and care and updates and revisions, and it's actually a way of doing work, not just installing all the systems and then we are golden. For example, now that we have this omnipresent internet and Internet of Things, this all of course means that we have to ensure that all the things we ever put into our networks or into our intranet or into our automation network needs to be secure, because usually the least secure component is the first one to fail. Similarly, as in the chain, the weakest link is always the point of failure. But with the cybersecurity, we also need to get used to the idea that we need to revise and audit our system more carefully, because if we connect everything to everything, then the most obvious point of failure might be something that we didn't think was obvious. For example, the smart lights, which on some companies like Philips sells on the supermarkets, are actually Internet of Things devices. They have computers in them. And there has been already reports that, for example, the smart lights have had an denial of service attacks against the smart vacuum cleaners, because for some reason they are using the same bandwidth or the same ports, so they are trying to block each other out from the system. And of course, even though this isn't exactly a cyber attack, it's something that happened because the engineers didn't know about each other and the systems ended up harassing each other. It's still something that we need to take into account in our design for the systems. But anyway, going into the usual types of attacks, of course, keep in mind that these are the attacks where we have someone who is doing this on purpose. We need to design the cybersecurity against also things that are not caused by some malicious force, but let's look at a couple of the more common types of attacks we all should probably know by now, because we all live in the same digitalized world. The most common type of attacks are the phishing attacks. Of course, this means that someone sends you an email or phone call and tells that they are from the maintenance department and so on and so on. And it's alarming how well these sort of attacks work. There is a reason why these are the most common types of attacks. For example, even in universities, people fall into these things. Even the professionals keep falling into these things because there's artificial intelligence and the language barriers or the automated translations are becoming much more smarter than usual. And also the Finnish language is no longer a safe harbor, because you know that if the person isn't speaking Finnish or can't pronunciate correctly, it's probably not going to be a certain person, or they cannot disguise themselves as someone who they aren't. Additionally, ransomware is a thing where they want to put your computer or system in a lockdown and require money for them to open it, or sometimes they don't even open it, they just lock it and take your money. And if you are foolish enough to actually pay for it, then you might get screwed out of both of your data and your money. This is obviously something that's a nuclear option for the company or automation plant or anything else, because this is something that never should happen. There's reports that this actually has happened before, but usually these sort of attacks are something that if you are running a sane corporation with the same security policies, these sort of things never occur. However, these sort of attacks do occur. Malware, which is more or less the traditional computer virus thing we might know, they are just software additions, small files, small drivers, small programs that try to sneak into your network to install things which can listen to your system, can collect information and send it somewhere, or can just, in case they are activated, harass or shut down your entire network. These are usually tools which enable attacks on your entire system, and usually they also require some social engineering to get into the place. Meaning that if you have people running the organization, it's usually also the people who need to be educated most, because the cybersecurity is only as good as the people who configure it or maintained it. If we don't train the people, we might as well have no security, because the social engineering is actually a scarily powerful way of sneaking past all the firewalls and all the configurations and stuff like that to get into your network. And of course, if we consider the test automation systems, this is all where it leads to. So we get malware which collects information passively from our systems, or we have someone snooping around on our network trying to collect information on our network hierarchies or topologies and systems, trying to find open ports or abuse vulnerabilities or use social attacks or social hacking to get something inside your network. It usually leads to cyber attacks, meaning that some person or some organization tries to shut you down or attacks you, or just has fun on your expense by changing things and locking you out of it, because it's fun to make you look like a fool as an organization. Anyway, of course, these are usually malicious attacks. I mean that these usually require the attacker to do, that they actually want to attack you. But on the other hand, as mentioned before, with the Internet of Things, there's also possibility for unintended cyber attacks between the subsystems or networks against each other. So these all basically require the same forms of security or activities to save your organization. So what do we use as a countermeasures when we are designing these sort of systems and trying to create this secure organization, or get a system running that's at least fairly safe and secure? First of all, quality. This is something that I cannot emphasize enough. If you can't trust your tools, then you don't have a secure network. So use approach which is robust, on which you can trust yourself, and which is built from known high quality components. This is a basic thing. If you skimp on quality with the security systems, you don't have security system, you have a system that just annoys your users and sometimes might cause catastrophic failures. Second of all, configure your network using sensible approaches. Of course, this means that you need to have network isolations in place, so that, for example, your office network or entertainment network is completely separated from your automation or systems management or embedded systems network. This sounds like it's a fairly straightforward thing to do, but in fact, actually, we have been involved in security audits, for example, for ships. And in several of them, there were severe security failures because the networks for controlling the ship and running the entertainment system, i.e. allowing the sailors to use email and internet, weren't actually separated. And why they weren't? Because the ship had only one functional internet connection, or the automation system internet connection was something that worked all the time, whereas the entertainment network worked only when we were in a port or near the shore where the wireless network or mobile network could be heard. So of course, create your network in a sense that it's isolated enough, but it's still something that supports all types of usages your system might actually need. Because users will find ways to countermeasure your network if it hinders them too much. This also brings us to another activity. So if we are giving privileges, access rights to different user groups, we have to use the approach where we forbid everything that isn't explicitly allowed. This because there's no way of actually knowing when and where and from which system the malicious attack might come from. So we need to consider the security, for example, for the network or the tools in a way that we only allow the things that we know are safe. This might sound like it's middle management or bureaucracy or just being an asshole to your user, but in fact, this is one of the cornerstones of having a successful security system in place. That said, we also should take into account the usability factor of the security measurements. Of course, mentioned earlier, if we have a network which doesn't actually enable or allow our users to do some things they want to do, or may have security measurements which are unnecessarily complicated or overshot. For example, if you have a security door which only few people have keys for, or which is very slow and not guarded, and it's in a place where it's actually intrusive for the people and there's no reason for it, people will just jam it open. This has actually happened in a nuclear bunker with the United States Army. So why wouldn't it happen in your organization? If the people can't access the building areas or the services they actually need, or it's unnecessarily complicated, people will just ignore, skip, or stop using the system. Finally, one of the important things also with the cybersecurity is the usability aspect. You need to have your tools and systems be something that's intuitive, usable. Your users are trained to use them. They understand what is normal and what is not normal behavior. This also helps to give you an early warning if something is malfunctioning or some attack is about to happen, but it also helps your users to understand that this isn't normal procedure, this isn't how things should happen. Works against the social hacking aspect, but also gives confidence that your users aren't actually trying to avoid working with the security or countermeasuring the security systems because they just want to. And of course, keep in mind that in many cases when the social hacking or phishing or something like this is happening, the idea is to create a very stressful situation for the user. Or if the cyber attack is about to happen or land upon your network, it's very stressful and very quickly happening thing. So your users or your security administrators have to be able to quickly dictate or understand what is happening, what's going on, and they have to be able to use the tools. And in case of important or critical industries or automation systems, just unplugging everything and shutting the place down isn't actually the answer. You have to have countermeasurements, you have to have contingency plan, you have to have people who understand how to counter different types of attacks. They need to train for it, they need to have policies or checklists against most common types of attacks. Also, all the security features need maintenance. Whether it's software or hardware or the training or whatever it is, it needs to be maintained. If you have out-of-date security measurements, you don't have security measurements. They are updated and patched and fixed because there's vulnerabilities in them. You need to maintain them. You need to have someone working with them who actually understands how to maintain them, how to update them, and also audit or test out your own system so that, for example, the people who need to work can actually do their work with the security systems, and even with the people who aren't your system operators or the control room operators or the people making the decisions who are also working in the plant, for example, electricians or the cleaning people or cleaning personnel, also understand how the security systems which affects their work, how it actually should be used, so that there's no vulnerabilities or, for example, the leaning person allowing unauthorized maintenance people inside your office rooms to install sniffers or something like that into the building networks or network boxes. So of course we need to maintain everything we do for the security, because in most organizations it's actually it's the hardware which needs to be configured correctly, and it's the software which needs to be configured correctly to run the hardware which does the main grunt of the security work. But unfortunately, in most organizations or in most buildings, the most important factor in your software or system security is that it's actually something that your users or people consider important, valuable, and beneficial, and significantly helping your organizations to do their work. So it needs to be up to date. It needs to be something that's usable. It needs to be something that's trustworthy, and it needs to be something that's effective, but not too intrusive, so that it doesn't actually hinder people from doing their work. On some critical industries or areas like nuclear power plants or aviation, people are willing to bend over backwards for security because they know the high costs of catastrophic failures. But on more down-to-earth user level, the security has to be omnipresent, but it's also something that doesn't hinder the usage of it. Because otherwise, people just decide that it's not worthwhile and put it out. Because people are usually the weakest link in almost all software and cybersecurity aspects. Okay, thank you for listening to me. This has been the brief outline of cybersecurity in 20 minutes presentation. I'm a couple of minutes over time now, but I think this is fairly good. If you have more questions to me or in general about the cybersecurity, especially on the industrial automation or from the viewpoint of software and software engineering or software design and software architecture, please contact me via email, and you can ask your course's teacher in charge for more contact details. Thank you and have a nice rest of the day.